James Mitchell had spent years saving for his dream home addition, an in-ground swimming pool. As a 37-year-old single father to 10-year-old Emma, he wanted to create a special place where they could bond and where Emma could invite friends over during the hot summer months. Working as an 8 project manager allowed him flexibility to work from home 2 days a week, but it also meant many late nights meeting deadlines after Emma had gone to bed. The pool represented more than just a luxury. It was his promise to Emma that despite the challenges of their small family unit, they would create joyful memories together. The journey to pool ownership had been arduous. 3 different contractors had provided quotes, each with timelines that seemed to stretch endlessly. James had spent countless evenings researching pool safety features, maintenance requirements, and neighborhood regulations. The HOA approval alone had taken 6 weeks, with James meticulously preparing his presentation to the board with 3D renderings and safety plans. Construction had begun in February, transforming their modest backyard into a chaotic pit of dirt and machinery. Emma had watched wide-eyed from her bedroom window as excavators dug deep into the earth, the workers laughing at her enthusiastic waves. Throughout the spring, James and Emma had documented the progress with weekly photos, creating a time-lapse of their dream taking shape. There had been setbacks, unexpected underground rocks requiring special equipment, a week-long rain delay, and a miscommunication about the tile selection. But James had handled each obstacle with determination. After 3 months of construction, permit approvals, and landscaping, the pool was finally completed in late May. The crystal blue water sparkled in the sunshine as James and Emma celebrated with a small poolside barbecue, inviting only close family and a few neighbors from their suburban cul-de-sac. James had installed soft lighting around the pool deck that illuminated the water with a gentle glow as evening fell. "Dad, this is the best thing ever," Emma had whispered, her feet dangling in the water as she sat beside her father on the pool's edge. Her long brown hair was pulled into a messy bun, her freckled face glowing with happiness. "Can we swim every single day this summer?" James had smiled, wrapping an arm around his daughter's shoulders. "That's the plan, kiddo. That's why we got it." His brother Michael raised a glass from the nearby patio table. To James, the man who finally fulfilled the Mitchell family dream of having our own swimming hole. The small gathering laughed and clinked glasses. Their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, who had brought her famous potato salad, nodded approvingly. "You've done a beautiful job, James. Very tasteful, not ostentatious like some pool installations I've seen. And those safety features you showed me are impressive." As twilight deepened, the guests gradually departed, leaving father and daughter sitting on new lounge chairs beside their pool. Emma had fallen asleep, wrapped in a fluffy towel, while James sipped the last of his beer, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. Their backyard oasis was everything he had envisioned, a private retreat where Emma could grow up enjoying summers the way children should, with sunscreen-scented days and the gentle sound of water lapping against tile. Little did he know that their peaceful sanctuary would soon become the focus of unwanted attention. 2 weeks after the pool opening, James had settled into a pleasant routine. Early mornings meant checking chemical levels and skimming leaves before work, while evenings were reserved for swimming with Emma after dinner. On a particularly humid Saturday in June, James was performing his weekend maintenance, vacuum in hand as he worked methodically across the pool floor, when he felt the distinct sensation of being watched. Glancing up, he noticed a woman peering over his fence. She wasn't making any effort to conceal herself, openly studying his backyard with an appraising gaze. James recognized her vaguely as the new homeowner from 3 houses down, Deborah Wilkins, though most neighbors referred to her as Deb. She had moved to the neighborhood about 6 months earlier, a divorced mother of 2 who had transferred from another state for work, according to neighborhood gossip. Unlike most newcomers, she hadn't attended any community events or block parties, keeping largely to herself. "Good morning," James called, trying to be neighborly despite his slight annoyance at the intrusion. He stood up straight, wiping beads of sweat from his forehead. Deb's face brightened with an immediate smile, as if she'd been waiting for his acknowledgement. She was in her early 40s with highlighted blonde hair cut in an angled bob that framed a face carefully made up even at this early hour. Her designer sunglasses rested atop her head, and she wore a tennis outfit despite there being no courts in their immediate vicinity. "Hey there, neighbor," she called with excessive enthusiasm. "That's quite the beautiful setup you've got. Must have cost a fortune." Before James could respond with a polite but dismissive comment, Deb continued, "I've been meaning to introduce myself properly. The kids and I have been absolutely dying in this heat. Our AC just doesn't cut it." James nodded sympathetically, returning to his cleaning. "It's been a hot one this year." So Deb pressed, leaning further over the fence, "What does pool maintenance run you monthly? Is it as expensive as everyone says?" Caught off guard by the directness of her question, James provided a vague answer about it being manageable with proper planning. "And when do you usually use it? Is it empty during weekdays?" She continued, her eyes scanning the water with obvious interest. We use it pretty regularly, James replied, growing increasingly uncomfortable with her questions. Emma loves swimming after school. Deb nodded thoughtfully, then brightened with what appeared to be a rehearsed casualness. You know, since we're neighbors, I was thinking it might be nice if we could occasionally use your pool when you're not. My kids are going stir-crazy indoors and neighbors should share amenities. It's the community-minded thing to do. The entitlement in her tone took James by surprise. He'd expected a request for an invitation someday, not an assumption of access rights. I appreciate your interest, James said carefully, but the pool is really just for family use. The insurance and liability issues make it complicated to have others use it unsupervised. Deb's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Oh, I understand completely, she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. Another time, perhaps. As she walked away, James couldn't shake his unease. Something in her expression, a flash of calculation beneath the friendly veneer, suggested this wouldn't be the end of the conversation. He made a mental note to check if the gate latch was secure before heading inside to start lunch for Emma and her friend, who was coming over to swim that afternoon. Over the next week, James noticed a pattern forming. Monday evening brought Deb to his front door, a plate of store-bought chocolate chip cookies wrapped in cellophane with a ribbon tied neatly around it. Just wanted to bring these by, she announced with a wide smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Being neighborly, you know. James thanked her politely, accepting the cookies while maintaining his position in the doorway to discourage any attempt to enter. Emma peered curiously from behind him. Such a warm evening, Deb sighed dramatically, fanning herself. My air conditioner is struggling to keep up. The kids are absolutely melting. She paused, glancing expectantly past James toward his backyard. I was just thinking how nice it would be to cool off in a pool right about now. James nodded sympathetically, but didn't take the bait. Well, thanks again for the cookies. Have a good evening. Wednesday afternoon, she appeared again as James was retrieving mail from his mailbox. This time, she carried a folder of local pool maintenance service flyers. I was researching for you, she explained, handing him the collection. Since you mentioned maintenance was a concern, did you know that the Johnsons on Maple Street have a pool-sharing arrangement with their neighbors? They trade access for help with chemicals and cleaning. James thanked her for her thoughtfulness but repeated that he preferred to handle things himself. Before he could excuse himself, Deb's tone shifted subtly. You know, James, it's a bit selfish to have such a wonderful resource sitting empty half the time when there are children in the neighborhood who could be enjoying it, she said, her voice honey-sweet despite the accusation. Community resources should be shared. It's not actually a community resource, James clarified firmly. It's private property that I paid for and maintain. By Friday, Deb's approach had become more direct. She arrived with her two children in tow, Zachary about 12 and Madison around 8. Both looking uncomfortable as their mother knocked on James' door at dinner time. We were hoping today might be a good day for a swim, Deb announced without preamble. The kids have been so well behaved all week, and I promised them a reward. James felt a flash of annoyance at being put on the spot, especially with the children present. I'm sorry, but as I've mentioned, we don't open the pool to others. There are liability issues with my homeowner's insurance. Oh, I'd sign any waiver. Deb dismissed his concern with a wave. And we follow all your rules. I'm afraid that's not possible, James said, his patience wearing thin. I hope you understand. Deb's smile hardened. Actually, I don't understand. It's not like you're using the entire pool at once. There's plenty of room to share. After James firmly declined again, he closed the door and leaned against it with a sigh. Emma looked up at him worriedly. Dad, she watches us from her window when we swim. I saw her yesterday with binoculars. James felt a chill despite the summer heat. The next morning, he installed additional privacy screens along the fence line. Later that afternoon, while Emma was practicing her backstroke, he noticed Deb standing on a garden chair in her yard, peering over the newly heightened fence. Their eyes met briefly before she quickly stepped down, but not before James saw the unmistakable flash of resentment on her face. After a weekend of blessed silence from Deb, James hoped the matter had finally been put to rest. Monday morning, however, he received a text from his neighbor across the street, Robert. Hey man, you might want to check out the new Facebook group Deb started. Things are getting weird. James rarely used social media, maintaining only a minimal profile to keep in touch with distant relatives. Logging in during his lunch break, he was shocked to discover Fairbrook Community Resource Sharing, a newly created group with 37 members already. The page's banner image showed a generic swimming pool with the text Share the Wealth superimposed over it. The most recent post from Deb herself read, Isn't it sad when privileged homeowners hoard luxury amenities while neighborhood children suffer in the summer heat? What happened to community spirit? Some people move to suburbs for the neighborhood feel but act like isolated monarchs over their tiny kingdoms. Hashtag share the wealth, hashtag community excess. Though she hadn't named him directly, the implication was unmistakable, especially when the first comment came from her account. My kids just watch from our window as the empty pool next door sparkles in the sun most days. Heartbreaking. James scrolled through earlier posts, his stomach knotting with each new discovery. Deb had carefully built a narrative over several days, beginning with seemingly innocent questions about neighborhood pool access before gradually introducing the concept of mandatory community resource sharing. She even posted links to obscure legal articles about right to access laws from entirely different contexts. Can't believe someone would make such a big deal about this, James muttered, closing his laptop. He decided against engaging, knowing it would only add fuel to the fire. That evening, while grilling chicken for dinner, James noticed colorful flyers in his neighbors' mailboxes. Walking to his own, he found one inside, a neatly designed announcement for a community meeting on equitable resource sharing, scheduled for the following weekend at the neighborhood park. A silhouette of a swimming pool dominated the background. Mrs. Peterson, tending to her rose bushes next door, called over the fence. "James, dear, did you get one of these ridiculous flyers?" "Just found it," he replied, holding up the paper. "Well, I've already called 3 other neighbors. None of us are going to that nonsense. We all know what she's doing." The elderly woman shook her head. "Some people should focus on buying their own pools instead of coveting others." James appreciated the support, but the situation was beginning to affect his daily life. At the grocery store on the following day, he noticed 2 mothers from his street whispering as he passed. At Emma's soccer practice, a father who'd always been friendly gave him only a curt nod, then moved to sit elsewhere. Friday morning, James found an anonymous note in his mailbox. Written in cramped, angry handwriting, "Elitist pig. Children are surafediaring while you enjoy lugaxuri." 2 similar notes appeared over the weekend, one calling him selfish and another suggesting he didn't belong in a community-minded neighborhood. "Dad, why is Ms. Henderson looking at us funny?" Emma asked as they walked home from the bus stop. Her teacher aide's mother lived in their neighborhood. James sighed, putting a protective arm around his daughter's shoulder. "Some grown-ups are having a silly disagreement, honey. Nothing for you to worry about." But as they turned onto their street, the sight of Deb standing in her driveway, pointing them out to 2 other women while speaking animatedly, made it clear that this campaign was only beginning. The final Saturday in June brought a heat wave that pushed temperatures into the high 90s. James had promised Emma and her best friend Lily a pool day while Lily's parents attended a wedding. The girls had spent the morning preparing an elaborate picnic of peanut butter sandwiches cut into star shapes, fruit arranged in rainbow patterns, and homemade lemonade. "Dad, can we use the floating unicorn today?" Emma asked, her face already slathered with sunscreen despite being indoors. "Absolutely," James replied, gathering towels from the dryer. "Just remember your water safety rules." The girls squealed with excitement as they raced to the backyard. James followed more slowly, enjoying their enthusiasm. He'd set up a small Bluetooth speaker, and Taylor Swift's latest album provided the soundtrack as the girls waded into the clear blue water. James settled into a lounge chair with his tablet, keeping a watchful eye while catching up on work emails. The afternoon unfolded perfectly. James grilled hot dogs for lunch, and the girls alternated between swimming and creating elaborate chalk art on the pool deck. Around 3 o'clock, as James was refilling lemonade glasses, he heard the unmistakable creak of the gate latch. Turning, he froze at the sight of Deb striding confidently into his backyard. Behind her trailed her children, Zachary and Madison, both dressed in bathing suits and clutching pool noodles and inflatable toys. Deb herself wore a designer swimsuit with a gauzy cover-up, oversized sunglasses, and carried a large tote bag presumably filled with towels and sunscreen. "Perfect timing," she announced cheerfully as if arriving for a long-scheduled appointment. "The heat is absolutely unbearable today." Emma and Lily stopped splashing, their expressions shifting from joy to confusion. James set down the pitcher and moved quickly to intercept Deb before she could reach the pool edge. "Deborah," he said firmly, keeping his voice measured despite his shock. "What are you doing?" "Oh, we talked about this," she replied dismissively, gesturing for her children to continue toward the pool. "It's far too hot to stay indoors, and since you've got all this space—" "We did not talk about this," James said, stepping directly into her path. "In fact, I've repeatedly explained that the pool is not open for neighborhood use." Deb's smile tightened. "Don't be ridiculous, James. You told me weeks ago it would be fine occasionally. We won't be in trouble." She raised her voice so others could hear. "We brought our own towels and everything." James felt a flash of anger at the blatant lie. "That's absolutely not true, and you know it. I've never given you permission to use my pool." "Dad," Emma called, her voice small and uncertain. Lily had already climbed out of the pool and was wrapping herself in a towel, looking uncomfortable. "It's okay, girls," James reassured them before turning back to Deb. "You need to leave. Now, this is private property and you're trespassing." Deb's friendly facade crumbled instantly. "You can't possibly be using the whole pool," she snapped, gesturing to the water. "There's plenty of room for everyone. You're just being selfish and discriminating against my family." "This isn't about space," James replied, struggling to maintain his composure. "This is about boundaries and respect, neither of which you're showing right now." "Kids, get in the pool," Deb instructed her children, ignoring James completely. "Do not get in that pool," James countered firmly. The children froze, caught in the standoff between adults. "How dare you contradict me in front of my children?" Deb's voice rose to a shriek. "Who do you think you are?" Emma burst into tears at the sudden hostility, and Lily rushed to comfort her friend. James felt a surge of protective anger seeing his daughter upset in what should have been her safe space. The confrontation had ended with Deb finally storming away, dragging her confused children behind her. James had spent 30 minutes calming Emma and Lily, both shaken by the hostile encounter. After calling Lily's parents to explain what happened, he decided the girls needed a break from the now-tainted pool day. "How about we go to Grandma's for dinner?" he suggested, forcing cheerfulness into his voice. "She made those chocolate cupcakes you love." Emma nodded tearfully, still clinging to her friend's hand. "Can Lily come too?" After confirming with Lily's parents, James packed the girls into his Honda CR-V. His mother lived just 15 minutes away, and he knew the change of scenery would help Emma recover from the upsetting incident. He texted his neighbor Robert to keep an eye on the house, mentioning briefly what had occurred. "No worries," Robert replied. "Heading to a baseball game, but we'll drive by when I return. That woman has serious issues." At his mother's house, James tried to relax as the girls helped bake a second batch of cupcakes, their spirits gradually lifting. He explained the situation to his mother in hushed tones while the girls were occupied. "You should look into a restraining order," she advised, her expression concerned. "This doesn't sound like normal behavior." Around 7:30, James received a text from Robert. "Dude, you need to get home now. She's in your pool." Attached was a photo clearly showing Deb and her children splashing in his backyard pool. James felt a surge of disbelief followed by rage. "Mom, can the girls stay a bit longer? I need to handle something at home." During the drive back, James called the non-emergency police line, explaining the situation calmly despite his racing heart. The dispatcher assured him an officer would meet him at his home. Pulling into his driveway, James could hear music and splashing from his backyard. Walking around the side of the house, he discovered his gate intact, but the privacy fence panel beside it had been damaged. The wood splintered where someone had clearly climbed over. Pool toys that weren't his floated in the water alongside the unicorn float that belonged to Emma. Deb reclined on his lounge chair as if she owned the place, scrolling through her phone while her children played Marco Polo in the deep end. James' pool cleaning equipment had been moved, and a cooler he didn't recognize sat open on the deck, beer cans and juice boxes scattered around it. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" James demanded, his voice tight with controlled fury. Deb looked up, not even startled. "Oh, James, we were wondering when you'd join us. I'd call the police." "They're on their way," he informed her, keeping his distance. "This is breaking and entering, not to mention trespassing." At the mention of police, Deb's expression shifted. "You're calling the police? On a mother and her children trying to cool off?" She sat up, suddenly alert. "That's insane. You're weaponizing law enforcement against a family." "You broke into my property after being explicitly told not to enter," James replied, gesturing to the damaged fence. "What did you expect would happen?" Instead of responding, Deb pulled out her phone and began recording him. "Everyone should see this," she announced, her voice taking on a performative quality. "This is what privilege looks like, a single man harassing a mother and her children for using an empty pool on the hottest day of the year."